Hey everybody, it's Jake at Kelly Wright Real Estate. So today's video I'm going to answer the question as directly, although not specific to you, of course. I hope you're not expecting to discover what your home is worth simply by watching this video. This is really kind of how the process that I use to help people answer this question when they ask it to me. Now, this should be a helpful video really for anyone, I hope. But I'm going to offer to generate a market analysis for your home. But you got to understand, I'm tied geographically. And so my areas of focus are Davis and Weber County, Utah. Of course, I still go into Salt Lake and Box Elder and surrounding areas as well. So if you're within that range, I can help you directly and specifically. Outside of that, this is just kind of the approach I take to help people nail down the value of their home. And so let's just dive into that before I start talking in circles. So, I get asked this question regularly because that's my job. And in my opinion, this is the peak of what a real estate agent's job is understanding market value. And it doesn't matter if I'm on the buyer side or if I'm on the seller side, really understanding what market value truly means. And when we talk about value, you can get into the differences between intrinsic value versus market value. When somebody asks me my opinion on market value or what their home is worth, the number I'm going to give is what I would expect that home to sell for if it were put on the market today. Now, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here, but this can exceed or be less than intrinsic or the inherent value of the home. And my baseline for that is, what would it cost to replace that home? Now, a good example of how it could be above or below that intrinsic value would be from just a couple years ago in 2021 when homes were selling, let's be honest, for more than they were worth. The way I would put homes on the market back then is I'd look at what had sold most recently and offer it based on those comparables and using the process that I'm going to cover today, and then let the market decide. It was impossible to predict what that home would sell for. I mean, we were seeing stuff regularly go for $50,000 above asking price, $100,000 above asking price. And I'm sure there are cases where it was even more than that. But it was very, very difficult. But back then there was so much demand for housing, you really didn't have to worry about it too much. It would sort itself out, and you would have multiple buyers going above list price, okay? So that's a good example of how market value would exceed that intrinsic value. So let's back that up and go into what the process is. So let's just say you've called me. You say, hey, I'm considering selling my home. Or even if not, you're just trying to get a baseline for what its value. So more of a casual opinion of value. So, sorry, let me turn this off real quick. I shoot these videos live. If you've watched more than one video, I don't edit them. I try and just come at it, be prepared, be real about how I approach things. So this is a checklist. This is the checklist that I use to gather the data on your home and then take it to the next level where I can generate that number. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but this is what I will say. It's important to understand. There's a few things that maybe you wouldn't think about that I'm going to jump into. So obviously, who owns this house? Address. When did you buy it? How long have you owned it? If I'm really nailing this down and we're going to get your home on the market, I want to know, how much you owe on the home. You would be surprised how many people don't exactly know that. So it's an important topic to bring up. How much do you owe? Hopefully we don't get into a time frame when I'm dealing with people that owe more than their house is worth. I haven't had to deal with that for well over 15 years and pursue a short sale. Home style, type, single family home, condo, townhome. What's your bed count, your bath count, Do you have a basement? What percentage of that basement is complete? Other rooms that maybe don't meet that definition can be anything. A den, it can be a theater room. You know, when we talk about basements, and sometimes I get pushback on this, below grade finished square footage is not valued the same as above grade. You can talk to an appraiser about that if you really want to. But if it's finished, it's finished. I don't really care a whole lot if it's a bedroom, if it doesn't qualify as a bedroom. Is it finished square footage? That's kind of what I'm looking at. How big of a lot are you sitting on? Are there detached structures, a detached shop? It's not uncommon to see in the west side of Weber County, you see a home, you're like, why is that home so expensive? It just looks like a basic rambler. Does it have a detached shop? And that's not uncommon, and it does. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. They've got a 2,000 square foot shop or bigger, whatever the case may be. Solar, I'm not going to go crazy on this. I've done other videos on solar in the past. I just want to know if you have it. This won't be a discussion on whether or not that adds any value, because that is not a fun conversation to have. Pool or any other amenity that the home has that I might not be aware of or wouldn't easily be able to ask about. Okay, now this is very, very important in my formula, is understanding the condition of a home. So I want to know about the big hitters. Age of roof. I recently just sold a house that the roof was shot. We knew it needed to be replaced, but they weren't going to replace it before they listed it. Let me back that up. I didn't know that necessarily the roof was shot, but I knew based on the age of the roof that an inspector is going to come through and get up there and check things out at a higher degree than I was, and would probably find things that were going to cause some concern for the buyer, which they did. HVAC, do you have central air? Do you have a swamp cooler? How's that looking? Windows, you get into an older home, if you've got rickety old single pane aluminum sash or just wood frame windows, buyers aren't real excited about that. How's your paint? How's your flooring? Are there any repairs that you are aware of that are needed? I want to know about that ahead of time. Maybe that's something we take care of in advance. Condition of the landscaping. So this is all the stuff to really give me a flavor for what is going on with your house. So that's the checklist, and with this information, I can give your property a grading. From A+, turnkey, modern, to oh crap, we've got a lot of work to do, or we're going to have to use price to motivate people. Is this investor grade? Is the property that far gone? And I've sold homes like that. And just recently did a video on that. So, it's always important to look at for comparables that are going to match the description of the property. Now, if I'm looking to sell a home, you've called me to get an approximation of value in order to sell it in the next little bit, I'm probably not going to give you a value over the phone, because we're going to set up a time for me to come and meet with you. But I'm going to do research before I show up to give myself kind of a ballpark range, and then we're going to go over everything together when I come out to your house. So I'm not going to give you something over the phone. If this is a casual request for value, then I'll probably bracket the value and give you a good idea, send you an email with some information. For the record, my opinions of value are brief and to the point. I've seen other agents and brokers deliver a market analysis, and my goodness, it is huge, like 80 pages of information. You ask a question, what's it worth? I'm going to give you a number. I'm going to qualify it, but it's going to be really to the point. I've seen stuff like that thick. Like, who would read that? I wouldn't read that. I don't want to read that. I mean, I've seen market analysis reports that are bigger than appraisals. I don't operate that way. Okay, so that being said, Obviously, I'm going to look at what has sold just in the last 60, maybe 90 days. Every situation is going to be a little bit different depending on the uniqueness of the home. But I'm going to very heavily, and this is where kind of the art and the science meet, I'm going to very heavily weigh what is actually for sale and what's under contract. And I'm going to reach out to those listing agents, and I'm going to talk to them and get an idea of how much activity they've had. If they've done price reductions, talk about that. If they are in a contract, get an idea of, were you able to get close to asking price or above? Pretty basic formula. This shouldn't take too much effort to understand this, but if a home goes under contract, the closer to its introduction to market, the fewer days on market, the better they're going to do. The longer days on market, the less you're going to get. There are some rare exceptions I've seen, but I don't want to deal with that. That's the reality. Okay, so when I'm giving this number with the idea of what would this home sell for in today's market, I want to price that in a way where I'm confident enough we're going to get an offer in 10 days or less. Okay, because like I said, you go beyond that, you go a month, you go 2 months, you're definitely going to see a reduction in activity. Usually what happens is all the buyers that are in the market at that moment that the home comes up, they're coming through that first weekend. And after that, you're going to get maybe a few stragglers, and then occasionally you'll get new buyers that are just entering the market that are going to come through. But agents as well as the general public, the more days on market that you see there, the question is, what's wrong with this property? Okay. So if I do happen to give a number over the phone and we are, going to get together, I always place that caveat though that, I need to see it because there might be some things that maybe you don't see quite the way I've been trained to see properties. And so I'm not going to nail anything down too specifically until I get there. So recently I listed a home, and I went through this entire checklist, got all the information that I thought I needed, and I show up to the home, and it was dramatically different than the description that I received. So I had gone to this house and prepared with a certain number that I had in my mind. Pretty straightforward house. We have thousands of these kinds of houses. I've sold many of them over the years. And I'm like, man, if this house is the way he describes it, this is a pretty easy this is a pretty easy valuation. But like I said, I show up, and we were pretty far off on the condition ratings of things. And I'm like, well, okay. So fortunately, I'd not given him this number ahead of time anyways. They were committed to selling. They were meeting with some investors ahead of time. They were getting investor numbers quite low compared to what a full market treatment would generate for this house. And once I sit down with somebody, I'm going to review again this information, and then I'm going to show them all of the data that I have been reviewing before my appointment, and then we're going to go through that again together, because I want sellers to be kind of part of that process. And it's always interesting. Sometimes a seller will go through these comparable properties, and which is clearly nicer than their own, and say, oh, it's just a lot like ours. And that's where I come in, because I know how the buyers are going to respond to things. And, I need to share my experience and expertise. So the number that I come up with after we've gone through this process and we're going to come on the market, it is usually a pretty good number for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe. But I'm always going to continue to monitor that market and see if there's any new data that's going to influence, which direction we may need to go through. Another case in point on value, I just listed a home recently, and it had been listed with another agent for a year. So the seller came to me, wanted to get my 2 cents, and in that year, that home's price was never adjusted. And so I'm able to inquire, like, well, you're for sale for a year. You didn't change the price once. Why? And the seller had their reasons. And I said, well, it doesn't make any sense. Nothing's changing about the property. There's not enough that's really changed on the market. I'm going to find out what information I need to give you a number that is going to achieve exactly what I've just said, that I want to get this thing under contract here in fairly short order. On top of that, this is a unique property in a unique area. So it's not in the major metropolitan area. It's actually in more of a resort destination. And so I said, look, this is the price we need to come at. And then if that's not going to work, because we're a little out of season and there's not as many buyers up there, just inherently there just are not, you have to be comfortable with making adjustments, because we've got to find what the market value is and get this property sold. As listing agents, we don't want to take on properties that are going to sit on the market potentially for a year. It doesn't achieve the whole goal. It doesn't get the seller what they want. Even if a seller wants a certain dollar amount, but they don't end up getting it, then we haven't accomplished what our job is. So I go into that with those expectations set. And as it would turn out, our price was right. I knew it was. I had good data to use, and we went under contract within about 48 hours. I mean, there was a little bit of back and forth, but effectively we were gone just like that. So previous listing at a year at a certain price, come in, boom, under contract in 48 hours, and that should be closing out here pretty soon. So this is the process I go through. Of course, there are a million different variables that would influence your particular home's value, that I absorb all of that information, go over everything with you, and explain why I'm coming up with the number that I'm coming up with. Now, that being said, if we are going to market, we are going to be listing the home. I'm going to go through all of this information. I'm going to give you the number that I recommend, but I'm not the seller. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you're the seller, and you have to make that decision. Every seller is always going to kind of nudge it, push it up just a little bit, because who wouldn't want more money? I get it. And then we'll have a conversation about that. Sometimes it's like, well, in this case that I just shared, yeah, there is no reason to believe that old number is going to be very useful at all. Why go down that path again? Or I might just respond, I'm not afraid. That's not a big enough difference. That's not going to be a game changer versus our number. Let's see what happens. If they're comfortable with it. But I always I've got the information to say, well, we're getting this response, but keep in mind this is where the number was, and this is why we need to make an adjustment. Okay. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. This is the process I go through. Now, if you want me to give you what this number is, get a hold of me. All my contact information is down below. Easy to talk to, easy to get a hold of, and we'll go through this process. A couple things I want to touch on. So tax value. I don't know where you live, how this might work, but in the last 20 years, in Davis, Weber County, Salt Lake County, the number that the county tax assessor is giving you, and they'll put it there as kind of market value, that's a soft number. I used to work with the county assessor's office. My experience was they're not trying to nail that down right on the nose. They would deal with so many appeals every year. I mean, they just wouldn't have the resources to probably deal with that. With rare exception, have I ever seen a county tax assessed value above market value. It happens, of course, but I don't see it that often. So that being said, I rarely refer to that number. I did recently for some very rural properties where there's not a lot of sales data available, and so just trying to build my case and figure some things out. I'll look at it, but I don't think it's a number you should base anything on when it comes to actually selling your home. And then Zillow, they've been around for a long time. They're using algorithms to generate a number. I don't refer to that either. I don't think it's a true number that anybody should put a whole lot of weight in. they've gotten better. I'll put it that way. The times that I have looked at it, I'm like, well, they're actually getting a lot more accurate, I guess. But I'm not going to solely use that information, and I often don't refer to it anyways. I'm really looking at what does your property have to offer, and what are the most similar properties doing that are for sale right now, and what is that trend? And that has been a helpful, reasonable process to generate good results. So let me know what you think. Hopefully this is helpful. And get a hold of me if there's anything I can do for you. Have a good one.